Hello. This is John T. Rhapsodes, Esquire, purveyor of awesome old-school audio stories, bringing you another Sut Lovingood story today from 1867 called Blown Up with Soda by George Washington Harris. George Harris walked the earth, or as Sut would say, the yeath, from 1814 to 1869, mostly in East Tennessee. In 1867, Harris published a book titled Sut Lovingood, Yarns Spun By Natural Born Durn'd Fool, containing 24 stories involving his crazy-like-a-fox rural Appalachian character, Sut Lovingood, who was based on a friend Harris made while surveying copper mines named William Sut Miller. Hear the words of old. Blown Up with Soda, from 1867, by George Washington Harris. Sut's hide is healed. The wounds received in his sudden separation from his new shirt, as previously described, have ceased to pain, and, true to his instincts, or rather, a family disposition, as he calls it, he pitches in and gets awfully blown up by a wild mountain girl. Hear him, poor fellow. George, did you ever see Cicely Burns? Sut asked me. Her daddy lives at the Rattlesnake Spring close onto the Georgia line. Yes, a very handsome girl, I said. Handsome? That there word won't cover the case. It sounds sort of like calling good whiskey strong water when you were 10 mile from a still house, it a-raining, and your flask only half full. She shows among women like a sunflower among dog fennel, or a hollyhock in a patch of smartweed. Such a bosom, too. Just think of 2 snowballs with a strawberry stuck butt-ended into both of them. She takes exactly 15 inches of garter clear of the knot, stands 16½ hands high, and weighs 126 in her petticoat tail afore breakfast. She couldn't crawl through a whiskey barrel with both ends stove out, nor sit in a common armchair, while you could lock the top hoop of a churn or a big dog collar round the hugging place. The what, Sut? I asked. The waist, you darn uninitiated gourd, you. Her hair's as black as a crow's wing at midnight. It is slick as this here bottle and as long as a horse's tail. I've seen her jump over a split-bottom cheer without showing her ankles or catching her dress onto the knobs. She could cry and laugh at the same time, and either loved or hated you all over. If her hate fell onto you, you'd feel like you'd been whipped with a poison vine, or a broom made out of nettles when your breeches and shirt were both in the washtub. She carried enough devil about her to run crazy a whole mess of people. Her skin were as white as the inside of a frog stool, and her cheeks and lips as rosy as a perch's gills in dogwood blossom time. Oh, and such a smile! Why, when it struck you fair and square, it felt just like a big jug of unrectified old Monongahela rye whiskey, after you'd been sober for a month, attending of a 10-horse prayer meeting twice a day, and most of the nights. 3 of her smiles when she were a-trying of herself, taken carefully 10 minutes apart, would make the grand captain of a temperance society so darn drunk he wouldn't know his britches from a pair of bellows, or a pledge from a water pot. Ooh, I'd be darned if it's any use talking. That there gal could make me murder old Bishop's soul hisself, or kill Mama, not to speak of Daddy, if she just hinted she wanted such a thing done. Such a woman could do more devilment than a loose stud horse at a muster ground. if she only knowed what tools she totes, and I'm sort of beginning to think she knows the use of the last darn one to a dot. Her ankles were as round and not much bigger than the wrist of a rifle gun, and when she were a-dancing or making up a bed or getting over a fence, oh, darn such women. Why ain't they all made on the hip break plan, like Mama, or Bet's Carr, or Suk Miller, so they wouldn't bother a feller's thinker at all? George, this world is all wrong anyhow. More temptation than preventative. If it were equal, I'd stand it. What can the old preachers and the ugly women expect of us, exposed as we are to such inventions as Cicely Burns? Oh, it's just no use in their talking and groaning and sweating theirselves about it. They must just upset nature onto her head and keep her there or shut up. Let's taste this here whiskey. Sut continued, wiping his mouth on his shirt sleeve, and said, One day I heard in the mountains a first-rate fourth-proof smash of thunder come unexpected and shake the yeath, bringing along a string of lightning as long as a quarter-mile track and as bright as a welding heat, a-racing down a big pine tree, tearing it into broom splits and toothpickers, and raising a cloud of dust and bark and an army of limbs with a smell sort of like the devil were about, and the long darning needle leaves falling round with a tiff-tiff quiet sort of sound. And then a quivering on the yeath as little snakes died. And I felt strange in my innards, sort of half comfort, with a little glad and right smart of sorry mixed with it. I've also seed a rattlesnake square hisself to come at me, a-saying zzz with that noisy tail of his, and I felt strange again, monstrous strange. I've seed the Oconee River jumping mad from rock to rock with its clear, cool water, white foam, and music. What's that, Sut? I asked. Music, Sut continued. The rushing water does make music. So does the wind, and the fire in the mountain, and it give me an uneasy strangeness again. But every time I looked at that gal, Cicely Burns, I had all the feelings mixed up, of the lightning, the river, and the snake, with a touch of the quicksilver sensation a-hunting through all my veins for my ticklish place. Together it all in a bunch, and tied. She were gal all over, from the point of her toenails to the end of the longest hair on the highest knob on her head. Gal all the time, everywhere, and one of the excitingest kind. Of course, I leaned up to her, as close as I dared to, and in spite of these here legs and my appetite for whiskey, that there shirt-skinning business, and Daddy's acting hoarse, she sort of leaned to me, just description, sort of like a careful man salts other people's cattle in the mountain, barely enough to bring 'em back to the lick log some day. That's the way she salted me, and I attended the lick log as regular as the old bell cow, and I were just beginning to think I were onto the right trail to her heart. Well, one day a cussed, palaverin' Yankee peddler, all jackknife and jaw, come to old man Burns's with a carryall full of apple-paring machines, jaw harps, calico, ribbons, sody powder, and other dern truck. Now, mind you, I'd never heard tell of sody powder in my born days. I didn't know it from Belteshazzar's off-ox, referring to the book of Daniel, chapter 4. But I knows now that it is like gunpowder for hurting, and dern nigh as smart to go off. Cicely had bought a tin box of the sody powder from the Yankee peddler, and hid it till I come to the lick log again, you know. Well, I just happened to pass next day, and of course stopped to enjoy a look at the temptation, and she were mighty loving to me. I never felt the like. She put one arm around my neck, and the other where the sussingill goes round a horse, and then she give me a kiss. Says she, "Sutty, love, I've got something for you, a new sensation." And I believed in it strong, for I began to feel it powerful. My toes felt like I were in a warm creek with minnows and nibbling at 'em. A cold streak were a-racing up and down my back like a lizard with a turkey hen after 'em. My hands took the ager, and my heart felt hot and unsatisfied like. Then Cicely poured about 10 blue papers of the fizzling powder into a great big tumbler, and as many white papers into another, and put nigh onto a pint of water into both of 'em, stirred 'em up with a case knife, and ground a morsel of nutmeg on top. She held one and told me to drink the other. I swallowed it in one run. Tasted sort of salty like, but I thought it were part of the sensation. But I were slightly mistaken. It were yet to come, and weren't long about it, hoss, you better believe. Eternally durn all sensations of every spot and stripe, I say. Then she give me the other tumbler, and I sent it a-chasing the first installment to the sag of my paunch, racehorse way. You see, I'd got the idea under my hair that it were love powders, and I'd swallered the devil red hot from home a-thinking that. Love powders from her. Just think of it yourself solemnly a minute, and sit still if you can. Just about the time I were catching my breath, I thought I'd swallered a thrashing machine in full blast, with a couple of bulldogs, and they had set into fighting, and I felt something coming up my swaller monstrous like a high-pressure steamboat. I could hear it a-snorting and a-sizzling. Caught again, by the great golly, thought I. Same family disposition to make a darn fool of myself just as often as the sun sets, and 15 times oftener if there's half a chance. Durn daddy evermore. Amen, I say. I happened to think of my horse, and I broke for him. I stole a hangdog look back, and there lay Cicely flat on her back on the porch, clapping her hands, screaming with laughing, her feet up in the air, a-kicking them a-past each other like she were trying to kick her slippers off. I was powerful sorry I were too busy to look at 'em. There were a road of foam from the house to the horse, 2 foot wide and shoe-mouth deep. Looked like it had been snowing, a-popping and a-hissing like a tub of soap suds with a red-hot moldboard in it. I gathered a cherry tree limb as I run, and I lit a straddle of my old horse, a-thrashing his hide like the devil beating tan bark. And a-hissing was near 4,000 mad ganders out of my mouth, eyes, nose, and ears. All this waked the old horse, and he fotched one rare, one kick, and then he went. He just mizzled scared. Oh, Lordy, how the foam rolled and the horse flew. As we turned the corner of the garden lot, I heard Cicely call, as clear as a bugle, "Hold it down, Mr. Lovingood. Hold it down. It's a cure for puppy love. Hold it down." Hold it down? Have you ever heard such an impossible... Why, right then, I were a-feeling the bottom of my paunch coming up after it, inside out, just like the bottom of a green champagne bottle. I were expecting to see it every blast. That, with what Cicely said, were hurting my thinker powerful bad. And then the ice water idea came to me that it weren't a love powder after all. I were aiming for Dr. Goodman's at the Hiwassee copper mine to get something to simmer it down with, when I met old Clapshaw, the circuit-riding preacher, a-traveling toward somebody's hot biscuit and fried chicken. As I come tearing along, he held up his hands like he wanted to pray for me, but I just rambled ahead. I were hot after a 10-horse double-action steam paunch pump, with one end socked deep into my stomach and a strong man-body doctor at the other to get all that sody out. It were my big want just then. The circuit preacher took a scare as I was coming straight for him. His faith gin out, and he dodged, flat hat, horse, and saddlebags, into the thicket. I seed his horse's tail fly up over his back as he disappeared into the bushes. There must have been spurring going on about there. I liked his motions under a skier right well. He made that dodge just like a mud turtle drops off a log when a big steamboat comes tearing past. As he passed old man Burns's, Cicely hailed him to ask if he had met anybody going up the road in sort of a hurry. The poor devil thought that perhaps he might. Weren't sure, but he had seen a dreadful forewarning, or a ghost, or Beelzebub, or the tariff. Taking all things together, however, in the little time spared to him for reflection, it must have been a crazy, long-legged, shaking Quaker, fleeing from the wrath to come, on a black and white spotted horse, a-whipping him with a big brush. And he had a white beard what come from just under his eyes, down to the pommel of the saddle, and then forked and went to his knees, and from there draped in bunches as big as a crow's nest, to the ground. And he heard a sound like unto the rushing of mighty waters, and he were powerfully exercised about it anyhow. Well, I guess he were, and so were his fat horse, and so were my old horse, and more so by a darn sight were me myself. After the circuit preacher composed himself, he read out his fool notions for Cicely, that it were a new steam invention to spread the Catholic doctrine and tote the Pope's bulls to pasture to distant lands, made out of sheet iron, Indian rubber, tan leather, ice cream, and fat pine, and that the horse's tail were made out of iron wire, red hot at the point, and a stream of sparks as long as the steering oar of a flatboat followed thereafter. And taking it all together, it warn't a safe thing to meet in a lane of a dark night. And he thought he had a call over the mountain to another circuit, that chickens warn't as plentiful over there, but then he were a self-denying man. Now, George, all this beard and spotted horse and steam and fire and snow and wire tails were darn scared circuit riders' humbug. It all come out of my stomach, without any vomiting or coaxing, and if it hadn't, I'd a done been busted into more scraps than there's eggs in a big catfish. "Hold it down, Mr. Lovingood, hold it down," said Cicely. Now weren't that just the darndest unreasonable request ever a woman made of man? She might just as well ask me to swaller my horse and then skin the cat on a cobweb. She's powerful on doctoring, though, I'll swear to that. "Why is that, Sut?" I asked. "'Cause she sure cured my puppy love with one dose, darn her." "George, is sody poison?" "No," I said. "Well, I sorta expected it were," said Sut, "and I sot in and ate herbs and grass and roots till I was pounced out like unto an old cow. My whole swaller and paunch is tanned hard as sole leather. Rot gut whiskey ain't got no odds now." Here's a drink to the darndest fool in the world. Me. And the bottom of Sut's flask flashed in the sunlight. And that concludes George Washington Harris's 1867 Sut Lovingood story called Blown Up with Soda. This is John T. Rhapsodies Esquire, purveyor of awesome old-school audio stories. Thank you for listening. You can find more stories like this in the channel's playlists. Find them by staying tuned for the last 20 seconds of this video and clicking on the end screen icons. You can also go to the channel homepage and click on the playlist tab. If you enjoyed this story and would like to hear more, please help me earn the warm embrace of Mr. and Mrs. YouTubes, who look with loving favor upon those channels whose listeners faithfully subscribe, like, comment, click the notification bell, and share the videos with their friends so that they too can hear the words of old.